Marcus Reed had spent 15 years as a forest ranger in the Cascade Mountains, but nothing in his experience could have prepared him for that fateful autumn night. The evening had started normally enough. He was doing his final patrol of the day, checking the perimeter of his remote station as the sun dipped below the ancient pines. The first sign that something was different came when his radio started picking up strange interference, a haunting, melodic static that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His German shepherd, Thunder, who normally remained calm during their patrols, grew increasingly agitated, whining and pawing at the ground. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered, adjusting his flashlight beam through the thickening fog. The temperature had dropped suddenly, unusually cold for September, and his breath came out in visible puffs. That's when he noticed the trees, their leaves were trembling despite the complete absence of wind. The strange lights came next, dancing through the canopy like aurora borealis gone wrong. They pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Marcus reached for his satellite phone, but it was dead, not even a flicker from the screen. Following Thunder's lead, Marcus ventured deeper into the woods, his boots crunching on fallen leaves. The dog stopped abruptly at the edge of a small clearing, hackles raised but not aggressive. There, in a shallow depression in the earth, lay three figures that defied explanation. They were humanoid but clearly not human. Their skin had a translucent quality that seemed to shift between pale violet and deep indigo. Their limbs were long and graceful, but terrifyingly thin, as if they hadn't eaten in weeks. Their large, silver eyes reflected Marcus's flashlight beam like mirrors. One of them, the tallest, tried to rise but collapsed back to the ground. "Please," it spoke, the word carrying an accent that seemed to echo in Marcus's mind rather than his ears. "We seek sanctuary." Years of training kicked in, overriding his shock. Whatever these beings were, they needed help. Marcus keyed his emergency transponder, then paused. Protocol dictated he should report any unusual activity immediately to headquarters, but something in those silver eyes made him hesitate. "Can you walk?" he asked, approaching slowly. Thunder, surprisingly, had calmed down and was now sitting attentively beside the aliens, as if he'd been guarding them his whole life. "Barely," responded another of the beings, this one smaller, possibly younger. "Our vessel. We had to abandon it. The hunters." The word came out like a curse. Marcus made his decision. Protocol could wait. These beings needed immediate help. "My station is about half a mile from here. If you can make it that far, I can help you." The third alien, who had remained silent, produced a small crystalline object that pulsed with inner light. "You risk much by helping us, Marcus Reed. The hunters will not be far behind." Marcus started at the use of his name but pushed his questions aside. "Let's get you to safety first. We can worry about the rest later." It took nearly an hour to help the three beings back to his station, their movements growing weaker with each step. Once inside, he quickly secured the perimeter, activated his backup generators, and began gathering supplies. The aliens collapsed onto his spare cots, their skin now almost transparent. "When did you last eat?" Marcus asked, pulling out his emergency rations. "Our sustenance, it is not like yours," the tallest explained weakly. "We require something else, something your world has in abundance but few can access." Before Marcus could ask for clarification, the crystal the third alien carried began pulsing more rapidly. Its light grew stronger, and suddenly Marcus felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. The aliens seemed to respond to it, their skin becoming more opaque, more vital. "What is that?" Marcus asked, watching in fascination as color returned to their faces. "Hope," the youngest answered. "In its purest form, your kind generates it naturally, but few can harness it. We feed on it. The hunters seek to destroy it, to replace it with fear and despair." Marcus looked out his window at the now quiet forest. Somewhere out there, these hunters were searching. He had a feeling his life was about to become much more complicated. But looking at these beings, seeing them regain their strength from something as intangible as hope, he knew he'd made the right choice. Thunder padded over and laid his head on Marcus's knee, as if agreeing with his decision. Outside, the aurora-like lights continued to dance among the trees, and Marcus Reed, forest ranger of 15 years, prepared himself for what would undoubtedly be the most extraordinary night of his life. Dawn crept over the Cascade Mountains, painting the fog-shrouded forest in shades of amber and gold. Marcus sat at his station's communications desk, staring at his still-dead satellite phone. The events of the night felt increasingly surreal, but the three alien beings resting in his living quarters were very real. The smallest one, who had introduced herself as Vex, stood by the window watching the sunrise with an expression of wonder. Her skin had taken on a more solid appearance, shifting between deep purple and midnight blue. "Your star," she whispered. "It carries so much potential, so much raw hope." Marcus poured himself another cup of coffee, his third since the rescue. "You mentioned something about feeding on hope. How exactly does that work?" The question had been nagging at him all night. The tallest alien, who called himself Naira, approached the desk. His movements were more fluid now, almost graceful. "Our species evolved to process emotional energy rather than physical matter. Hope, love, joy, these are not just feelings to us. They are sustenance." He gestured to the crystal that the third alien, Zara, still held. "This is a hope collector. It allows us to store and process the ambient emotional energy of living beings." Thunder, who had barely left Marcus's side all night, suddenly perked up his ears. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Marcus moved to the window, scanning the tree line. Nothing seemed out of place, but years of ranger experience had taught him to trust his dog's instincts. "The hunters," Zara spoke for the first time since their arrival, her voice carrying a musical quality that made Marcus think of wind chimes. "They're scanning the area. We've stayed too long in one place." Marcus pulled out his binoculars, methodically searching the forest. "Tell me about these hunters. What exactly are we dealing with?" Vex moved away from the window, her expression darkening. "They are like us, but corrupted. Where we feed on hope, they consume fear and despair. They believe it makes them stronger." She touched the wall of the station, and Marcus watched in amazement as patterns of light rippled out from her fingers. "Your world is at a tipping point, Marcus Reed. Humanity generates both hope and fear in tremendous quantities. The hunters want to tip the balance toward darkness." A distant sound caught Marcus's attention, like metal scraping against metal, but softer, almost musical. Thunder's growl deepened. "We need to move," Naira said urgently. "They're getting closer. Your kindness has put you in danger." Marcus checked his shotgun, more out of habit than any belief it would be effective against alien hunters. "This is my forest. I'm sworn to protect everything in it." He paused, considering their options. "There's an old fire lookout tower about 3 miles north. It's been abandoned for years, but I keep it stocked with emergency supplies. We can." He was cut off by a sudden, high-pitched tone that made Thunder howl in distress. The windows vibrated, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began forming on the glass. Zara's crystal pulsed with increasing intensity. "They're trying to track our energy signature," she explained, her voice tight with concern. "The Hope Collector. It's like a beacon to them." Marcus grabbed his emergency pack and started gathering supplies. "Is there any way to mask it?" Vex and Naira exchanged looks. "Yes," Vex said slowly, "but it would require an enormous amount of positive emotional energy to overwhelm their sensors, more than we can generate in our weakened state." Marcus shouldered his pack, checking that Thunder's service vest was secure. "Then we'll have to find another way. I know these mountains better than anyone. There are caves, underground streams." He stopped as Zara placed her hand on his arm. The contact sent a wave of warmth through his body, along with a cascade of images. Stars wheeling overhead, vast cities of crystal and light, beings of pure energy dancing through the cosmos. "You don't understand," she said softly. "We didn't crash here by accident. We chose Earth for a reason, your species. Humans have an extraordinary capacity for hope, even in the darkest times. That's why the hunters want to corrupt this world, and that's why we have to protect it." The scraping sound grew closer, accompanied by a deep thrumming that made the floor vibrate. Through the window, Marcus caught glimpses of shadows moving through the trees, too tall, too fluid to be human. "The fire tower has a clear view of the valley," Marcus said, checking his compass. If they're tracking you by energy signatures, maybe height will give us an advantage. We can see them coming. Naira nodded approvingly. Your strategic thinking serves you well, but you should know, once the hunters realize you're helping us, they'll never stop hunting you too. Marcus looked at Thunder, who stared back with unwavering loyalty. Then he glanced at the three aliens beings who fed on hope itself, now turning to him for help. The weight of the situation settled on his shoulders, but instead of fear, he felt a surprising sense of purpose. Then they better be ready for a chase, he said, leading them toward the back door. Because this is my forest and I don't give up easily. As they slipped out into the misty morning, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was now part of something much bigger than himself. The fate of these strange beings, and perhaps Earth itself, might depend on what happened in these mountains over the next few hours. Behind them, the shadows among the trees began to move with purpose, and the air filled with the sound of alien hunters on the trail of their prey. The climb to the fire tower was treacherous in the growing light. Marcus led the group through hidden trails and dense underbrush, while Thunder ranged ahead, scouting for danger. The three aliens moved with increasing difficulty as they gained altitude, their skin becoming more translucent with each passing mile. The air is thinner here, Naira explained between labored breaths. Less concentrated emotional energy from the surrounding life forms. He stumbled, and Marcus caught his arm, steadying him. The moment their skin made contact, Marcus felt another flash of awareness, not just images this time, but emotions. He experienced Naira's exhaustion, his determination, and underneath it all, a deep sense of guilt. Before he could process what he'd felt, Thunder's warning bark echoed through the trees. Down, Marcus hissed, pulling everyone behind a fallen log. Through the morning mist, dark shapes moved with unnatural grace. The hunters were unlike anything Marcus had imagined. Their bodies seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating void-like silhouettes that hurt his eyes to look at. Zara's crystal dimmed automatically, but the hunters' heads snapped toward their position anyway. One of them made a sound like breaking glass, and the temperature plummeted. Frost crackled across the log they hid behind. They're trying to feed, Vex whispered, her voice trembling. They consume fear, remember? They're attempting to terrify us to make us more nutritious. Marcus felt it then, an overwhelming wave of dread that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Thunder whimpered, pressing against his leg. Images of his worst fears flashed through his mind. The forest burning, his family dying, endless darkness. No, he growled through clenched teeth. This is my forest, my home. He reached out and grabbed Vex's hand with his left and Naira's with his right. Focus on that, on home, on hope. The crystal in Zara's hands suddenly flared with brilliant light. The hunters recoiled, their void-like forms rippling with disturbance. In that moment of confusion, Marcus saw their chance. Run, he shouted, pulling the aliens to their feet. They sprinted toward the tower, no longer trying to stay hidden. Behind them, the hunters recovered and gave chase, their movements becoming more predatory, more focused. The tower loomed ahead, its metal framework stark against the morning sky. Marcus had maintained it over the years, keeping it sturdy despite its official abandonment. Now he prayed those maintenance visits would pay off. They reached the base of the tower just as something whistled past Marcus's head, leaving a trail of freezing air in its wake. Up the stairs, he commanded, bringing up the rear with Thunder at his heels. The aliens climbed with desperate energy, while below the hunters began their pursuit. The metal stairs vibrated with their approach, each step ringing with that same glass-breaking sound. At the top platform, Marcus slammed the reinforced door behind them. The tower's small cabin was just as he'd left it, emergency supplies stacked neatly against one wall, solar-powered radio equipment on a desk, and most importantly, windows offering a 360-degree view of the surrounding forest. We're trapped, Vex said, looking around the small space. No, Marcus replied, moving to the radio equipment. We're exactly where we need to be. He began flipping switches, and to his surprise, the equipment hummed to life despite the alien's presence. This is an old frequency, one nobody monitors anymore, but if your crystal can generate that much energy. Zara's eyes widened with understanding. She held up the crystal, which was still pulsing with stored hope. We could broadcast it. Broadcast what? Naira asked, helping Marcus move a heavy cabinet against the door. Hope, Marcus said simply. Pure, concentrated hope. You said humans generate it naturally. Well, this tower was built to transmit signals across hundreds of miles of wilderness, if we can convert your crystal's energy into radio waves. A massive impact shook the tower. Through the windows, they could see the hunters climbing the outer framework, their void-like forms making the metal rust and decay wherever they touched. The crystal wasn't meant for this, Zara warned, even as she moved toward the radio equipment. Converting its energy, it could destroy it, and without it we'll have no way to store the emotional energy we need to survive. Another impact, the door groaned against its hinges. Marcus looked at each of them in turn, these beings who had chosen Earth as their sanctuary, who fed on humanity's capacity for hope. Then he looked at Thunder, still standing guard despite his fear, and thought about every sunrise he'd watched from this tower, every life he'd helped save in these mountains. Sometimes hope isn't about storing energy, he said, reaching for the crystal. Sometimes it's about letting it go, trusting that something better will follow. The door burst open in a shower of frozen splinters. The hunters poured in, their forms solidifying into nightmarish shapes. But Marcus had already connected the crystal to the radio equipment, and Zara's hands were glowing as she channeled its power. The crystal began to sing. The crystal's song filled the tower with impossible harmonies. It wasn't just sound, it was pure emotion translated into energy, hope given voice. The radio equipment crackled and sparked, its ancient transistors struggling to contain the power flowing through them. The hunters froze in their tracks, their void-like forms wavering as the wave of energy washed over them. Marcus felt the crystal's power resonating through his entire body, calling forth every moment of joy, every triumph, every small act of kindness he'd ever experienced. "It's working," Vex cried out, her skin beginning to glow with an inner light. Around her, the air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. But the hunters weren't retreating. The largest of them stepped forward, its form solidifying into something almost humanoid, but wrong like a shadow given depth. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of avalanches and winter storms. "Foolish light-bearers," it rasped. "Your broadcast doesn't just spread hope, it reveals your presence to every hunter within 1,000 miles. Thunder lunged at the creature, but passed right through its shadowy form. The temperature in the room plunged further, frost creeping across the windows. Naira stepped forward, his own form beginning to shift, becoming more ethereal. "Perhaps that was our intention, Void Commander. How many of your kind will come? How many will be drawn away from their hunting grounds, leaving those areas free to heal?" Marcus looked at Naira sharply, suddenly understanding. This wasn't just about escaping, you were leading them here deliberately. Zara nodded, her hands still channeling the crystal's power into the radio equipment. "Earth is too important to fall to darkness. Sometimes, to protect hope, you must gather the shadows in one place." The Void Commander laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "And what will you do when we are all here? Your crystal cannot maintain this output forever. Already it begins to crack." He was right. Marcus could see fissures spreading through the crystal's surface, its light becoming more erratic. The radio equipment was smoking now, components burning out from the overload. But Vex was smiling. "We don't need it to last forever, only long enough." Suddenly, the sky above the tower lit up with dozens of brilliant points of light, more ships. But these were different from the hunters' vessels. They shone like stars brought close to Earth, their hulls rippling with the same energy that powered the crystal. "The Light Guard," Naira announced. "We knew they would come once we could signal them strongly enough. Thank you, Marcus Reed, for giving us the means to call our defenders." The Void Commander roared in fury, its form expanding to fill half the tower room. The other hunters began to merge with it, creating a writhing mass of shadow that threatened to engulf them all. "If we fall, we will take you with us," the unified voice of the hunters thundered. "Your precious humans will watch their protector die, and their fear will feed us for centuries." Marcus felt the shadows pressing in, felt the cold trying to freeze his heart. But instead of fear, he felt something else rising within him. All those years in the forest, protecting his slice of the world, learning its rhythms, saving lost hikers, guiding people to safety, they had taught him something vital about hope. "You're wrong," he said, stepping forward. Thunder pressed against his leg, brave despite his terror. "Hope isn't just an energy source. It's not something you can destroy by killing those who carry it. It's a choice we make every day in the darkest moments." He reached out and placed his hand on the crystal, adding his own emotions to its song. The fissures in its surface began to glow with new light. "I've spent my life protecting this forest," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "Not because I had to, but because I chose to, because even in the darkest nights I believed in dawn." The crystal's song changed, harmonizing with some deep frequency of the earth itself. Through the windows, Marcus could see the light guard ships descending, their energy forming a net of radiance over the forest. Zara's eyes widened. The crystal, it's not just transmitting anymore. It's resonating with the human capacity for hope itself. The Void Commander's massive form began to fracture, pieces of shadow flacking away like dark snow. "What is happening?" "Hope," Vex said simply, "finds a way to grow even in the darkest places. That's what you never understood." The crystal pulsed one final time, and Marcus felt something unlock in his chest, a power he'd never known he carried. Around him, the aliens began to shine like newborn stars, their forms transcending their physical shapes. As the crystal shattered and the dawn broke over the mountains, Marcus Reed, forest ranger and now something more, prepared to help reshape the future of two species. The real question was no longer about survival, but about what would come next. And for the first time since this all began, he couldn't wait to find out. The aftermath of the battle transformed the fire tower into something extraordinary. Where the crystal had shattered, tiny points of light danced in the air like luminous seeds, each carrying a fragment of its power. The Light Guard ships hung in the dawn sky like a constellation brought to Earth, their energy containing the last dissolving remnants of the hunters. Marcus stood among the scattered crystal shards, Thunder faithfully at his side, watching as Vex, Naira, and Zara's forms stabilized into something between their physical and energy states. They glowed with an inner light that seemed more natural now, more sustainable. "The crystal's destruction," Naira explained, examining his own shimmering hands. "It wasn't an ending, it was an evolution." Through the tower's windows, Marcus could see more Light Guard ships arriving, their crews beginning a systematic sweep of the forest. Where their light touched, the lingering shadows of the hunter's influence faded, leaving the natural world renewed and vibrant. "You knew this would happen," Marcus said, not as an accusation but as a realization. "You chose this location, this tower, because you needed someone who understood both protection and hope." Zara nodded, moving to collect some of the floating crystal fragments in a small containment field. "We searched for months, monitoring human broadcasts, studying your species. When we detected your daily routines, the way you cared for this forest and its visitors, we knew we'd found the right ally." "But we didn't anticipate everything," Vex added, her form shifting like auroral lights. "The strength of your connection to hope, your ability to amplify our crystal's power, that was beyond our calculations." A tall figure of pure light entered through the tower's broken door. Unlike the other Light Guard members, this one's radiance was tinged with gold, marking them as a leader. They spoke in a language that seemed to bypass Marcus's ears and go straight to his understanding. "The hunter threat in this sector has been neutralized," the figure reported. "Their ships have been contained and their influence is being purged from the surrounding areas, but there's something else." The leader turned to Marcus, their golden light dimming to a comfortable glow. "You've done more than help defeat the hunters. You've shown us a new way forward." Thunder woofed softly, and Marcus scratched behind his ears, processing the implications. "What happens now?" "Now," Naira said, "we rebuild, not just our societies, but the bridge between them." He gestured to the crystal fragments still floating in the air. "These shards contain something unique, a fusion of human hope and our own energy. They could form the foundation of a new kind of relationship between our species. Outside, the sun had fully risen, its light mixing with the alien energies to create beautiful refractions in the air. Marcus could see forest animals cautiously emerging, drawn to the renewed vitality of their environment. The tower will need to be rebuilt, he mused, looking at the damaged structure. And someone will need to explain why there's suddenly so much unusual activity in a supposedly abandoned area of the forest. Zara smiled, her form solidifying slightly. Actually, we have a proposal. The Light Guard has been searching for a way to establish a permanent presence on Earth, one that could prevent future hunter incursions while fostering understanding between our peoples. We'd like to establish this location as the first joint human-alien ranger station, the golden figure added. A place where both species can learn from each other, where we can monitor for threats while studying Earth's unique capacity for generating hope. Marcus looked around the tower room at the burned-out radio equipment that had broadcast a signal strong enough to save 2 species, at the scattered crystal shards that represented a new beginning, at Thunder who had faced impossible odds without fleeing. "You want me to be part of this," he said. It wasn't a question. "You already are," Vex replied. "The question is whether you want to continue." Through the windows, Marcus could see more lights descending from the ship's other aliens like Vex, Naira, and Zara, coming to help with the restoration. In the distance, he could make out the first curious humans approaching, drawn by the spectacular light show in the sky. He thought about his years of service, about all the times he'd helped lost hikers find their way home, all the animals he'd protected, all the small daily acts of hope he'd never realized were so significant. This was different in scale, but not in essence. It was still about protection, still about guidance, still about hope. "Well, Thunder," he said to his faithful companion, "looks like our patrol route just got a lot more interesting." The dog wagged his tail, clearly approving. Around them, the crystal fragments pulsed with new energy, and the dawn light filled the tower with promise. Marcus Reed, no longer just a forest ranger but now a guardian of something far larger, smiled as he watched his world change. The forest had always been his home. Now it would be something more, a beacon of hope for 2 species, a testament to the power of kindness, and a reminder that sometimes the most important choices are the ones we make when no one is watching. Except, of course, for those who feed on hope.